Hi, I'm Mark Iskowitz, editor-at-large for MM+M, and I want to welcome you to this vodcast about the topic of aligning HCP and DTC engagement and the benefits for healthcare marketers. And I'm super excited to welcome my guest, Erin DiRuggiero, who's Chief Digital Officer at Swoop, and she's going to tell us about this. Erin, welcome, and
Thank you.
And I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate that you can pronounce my name. That's impressive.
As a guy whose last name ends in Z,
Yeah.
I have an appreciation for pronunciation.
Well. No, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So it's great to have you here. Swoop is a company that uses AI, machine learning, real-world data to generate high-quality audience segments that pharma brands can use to drive script lifts.
Mm-hmm.
How did I do? Is that an okay description?
Yeah, that's great.
That was just scratching the surface. But for folks out there who may not be familiar with the company, could you give a high-level overview of the organization?
I can. Yeah, I think, everything you're talking about with AI and real-world data and machine learning is at the core of how we approach creating audiences for pharma marketers, for med device companies. But I think primarily we're incredible listeners. What we do when we talk to customers is try to figure out what their challenge is and then how we use the tools that we have, whether it's AI or RWD or machine learning, to create an audience that we can then use to activate against that audience in some capacity on a digital channel. Sometimes it's a challenge that requires more than just an audience build. So we, with my company that has just come into the Real Chemistry family, can look beyond the audience itself and look at really custom use of proprietary technology and insights so that we're targeting people with the right message at the right time in the right location.
Mm-hmm.
But at the core of what we do, we're trying to solve challenges that our customers have. And the tool that we use, a lot of that comes from AI and ML approaches.
Now, TI Health, which you founded in 2018, and then you ran it as CEO until it was acquired by Real Chemistry just this past March. As I understand it, you specialize in HCP engagement, and then the marriage of that with DTC seems to be a particularly complementary one. Talk about why it's a good time for that, and perhaps what some of the benefits of that in marriage, or that union, might be for marketers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good marriage between TI Health and Swoop. So they'd been in the business and really are best in class around direct-to-consumer audiences and identification and enabling activation in a variety of ways. And we've been more focused on the healthcare professionals for even the last 13 years, to the point where we were able to really look and understand, what message is this physician or nurse practitioner most motivated by, and where do I want to find them where they're most engaged and open to this non-personal promotional messaging. So the coming together of Swoop and TI Health has really enabled what I see as a big challenge to, consolidate and think about how are we going to approach this connection between the patient and provider in a more synchronized way. So what we can do now is look at HCPs treating certain patient populations and then have a simultaneous side-by-side activation with directly complementary messaging, which was harder to do kind of working in silos. And I think a lot of the industry is tending to move towards this. We hear a lot about, you write a lot about consolidation and the need to control frequency and touch points, and we don't want to oversaturate messaging, but it's really about creating more efficiency in these connections for patients and providers, where if you can target them kind of at the same time with similar messages, we're seeing really incredible kind of script lift impact or new to brand start impact from that combination.
And it's a great time because marketers are making that shift toward omni-channel, which obviously is about synchronizing between the various audiences. So you're bringing those two main ones together. DTC and HCP are probably the biggest ones, followed maybe by payer and pharmacist and NPPA. But great.
Yeah, we're definitely a piece of that omni-channel puzzle. We're able to do what you said, to really activate, synchronize the messages between HCPs and DTCs, but we can incorporate reps, into the picture. We can alert them when something meaningful has happened. We have 8 different digital channels where we can synchronize that messaging. So it's not just programmatic. we look at EHR, we look at social, we look at TV. So there's a lot that we can do now combined that we're mightier together than we were apart.
How does TI Health, generate such precision insights and such, high level healthcare trigger event data? Let's pop the hood on that. The Affinity platform, which maps 1.5 million HCP profiles with their digital behavior, to generate right message, right time. Talk about how that, is layered in with RWD, and, does that include social determinants of health data as well?
Yes. So great question. The Affinity data was really exhaust data from all of the activation. So we had observed events, exposures, engagements, what HCPs were clicking through on, which locations they were actually engaging with the message in and around the most. So the best example I can think of with RWD and SDOH would be, if we were looking at targeting healthcare professionals that were serving patients that had non-English language proficiency and they were having trouble adhering to their medications, we can use real-world data to really refine the tuning on where we were looking to engage those HCPs that had very specific challenged patient populations that had barriers to getting on therapy. And that's something that we can do across the board. So we can look at using SDOH to really filter that messaging and the message that HCP is going to be most responsive to drive the engagement to a portal or get them to talk to the patient about ride share support or non-English language support based on the populations that they're serving.
All those things beyond the pill that help a person to live a healthier lifestyle that maybe aren't addressed by one single company.
Exactly.
Yeah. Behind every great data-driven company is a proprietary data platform, right?
This is true. Yeah.
Okay, so now the $64,000 question, and a lot of people are probably wondering, how do you measure success? How of this unification of DTC and HCP?
So it really depends on what we're doing, but I would say, we're agnostic to how we're measured or who measures us in terms of new patients getting on therapy and script lift, test and control. There are instances where we have unbranded campaigns and there's not, an approved therapy. So pre-FDA approval, we can do surveying and really look at behavior change or sentiment change by remarketing and messaging those HCPs and asking kind of how they interacted with a booth. If we're doing an ASH target or an ASCO target, things like that. So KPIs would be an entire hour-long podcast of what people value. I think we ultimately want to get beyond the web analytics metrics. The time spent on a website, whether or not somebody looked at 2 to 4 pages is great as an indicator or a piece of the puzzle. We're really interested in, did this physician take a different course? Did we really truly impact behavior? And for patients, especially in rare diseases, getting connected to clinical trials or getting connected to therapy, being able to look and touch patient outcome impact is really, I think, the holy grail of where we want to be whenever possible.
I've heard physicians, like anybody, can be a little ritualistic in their behavior. So getting them to change, takes a lot. Do you have any case studies that you can share with us of this kind of synchronized targeting?
Yeah, we do. We do often target healthcare professionals and patients at the same point of care location. So we have products. One is MOSI for the HCPs, and that came out of the kind of low-C, no-C terminology in the space where we wanted to get more Cs by mobile targeting to physicians on their personal devices. That is used in combination with our patient activation in the waiting room called RoomRx. So when we look at that, we have examples where we'll serve patient support or patient assist access support messaging to the physicians at, let's say, Texas Oncology. Patients would get a copay support or cost assistance message that was really complimentary. And when we synchronized that, we actually saw a 21% script lift, one of many studies we've done, but a 21% lift when we had that really synchronized approach to targeting, same place, same kind of provider treating that specific patient, but complementary creative messaging that was tailored to their preferences.
Sure. Do you think that people have kind of an expectation that the messaging is going to be synchronized like that, or do some people find it a little bit off-putting?
I don't know that a patient might know necessarily that the provider is being messaged with that same kind of complementary message, but I think if they're in that, that clinical mindset and you're about to go have a consult with your oncologist or your neurologist, having a conversation that you're both really prepared for and educated about is really what's impacting, I think, the decision making. We're not geared to try to disrupt or annoy anybody with that type of messaging. It's really educational. It's really about awareness and taking advantage of this is the moment where, they really need to be prepped with that information before that consult occurs.
Mm-hmm. Sure. This sounds like a really beneficial union. Why don't you think more pharma companies are, taking advantage of that synchronization? And what are the challenges to synchronized targeting?
I think they're trying. I think we're starting to see some of that happen. I think we're seeing more of a consolidation, at least from where I sit. There used to be a professional agency, and this is my consumer agency. And I think now there's just such a need to think about this journey as this intertwined, connected experience. It's not necessarily what's my patient journey or provider journey, but where do they intertwine? And where are those moments that really matter where we can motivate them to, take a meaningful next step that's going to impact the patient. So I think we're starting to see consolidation from an agency perspective. We're starting to see consolidation in budgets or more openness to, for a big idea, show me how you would combine, the patient provider activation. But it's challenging because there are still customers that have 12 agencies and they're making decisions somewhat separately. And I think that's a trend we'll continue to see is it's going to live in one place at some point, which gives you more, ultimately more control over the entire Omni experience.
Mm-hmm. And from our perspective, we talk to agencies and the ones that have clients who allow them to do both HCP and DTC integrated campaigns. They feel that they can drive better engagement that way, and they feel like they're further along the curve. But like you say, a lot of client side marketers, it's aspirational at this point still, and that probably has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, so. It's not easy to change, especially if you've been doing something for 30 years one way. But I think there's a willingness and an openness now more so than before to really pilot, to experience what this could look like. Show me the impact of what this means, and a tactical approach, but show me the benefit or the ROI. I think that's really where we always have conversations, and people are much more willing to change if they see the tangible effect of what that looks like.
Sure. So, Erin, what kind of advice would you give a pharma marketer who perhaps wants to champion this approach internally? Are there tips that you can give for how they can dip toes in the water?
I think pilot is a friendly term that most people are open to. We're certainly open to testing and learning along with the customer. To champion for doing something new, but I know that can be very scary in the pharma world. It's almost like everybody wants to do something for the first time as long as somebody else has made sure that it was effective and impactful. But trying not to boil the ocean is something that we talk a lot about. It's, what can we do now? What makes sense now? Where are they in their cycle from a brand perspective? And how can we look at something that's really easy to digest and measure as a first step and a first start?
Right. So like take the one brand perhaps that where you want to test that synchronized messaging on, right? Something like that. Yeah,
one brand, and maybe it's a nuanced kind of challenge that can't be met through some more traditional approaches. And so we look at point of care activation, patient provider, because there's something happening clinically that is really important for that particular therapy, as opposed to talking to physicians when they're in a different mindset or different context. And that's where we see, I think, the best success with pilots is we're solving for challenges that are more difficult to get at from the traditional approaches. And there are always champions that we have on the pharma side that are, at centers of excellence, or they're heads of innovation, and they're really thinking about breaking the mold in some way. And they're more likely to set aside innovation budgets, set aside pilot budgets to test and learn.
Who do you find is most receptive to this on the client side? Is the ones that, like you say, have that center of excellence, or is it the smaller companies, perhaps that don't have the COE, but they're more of a blank slate?
I think both. There are really sharp, forward-thinking marketers on both sides. I think we see even the brand marketers themselves are champions. They know their patient experience. They know what their HCPs are challenged with, and so they'll come to us and challenge us to think about how we can bring an experience that's new and novel. I'd see it across the board.
Yeah, nice. So one more question for you, Erin. We'll let you go. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about artificial intelligence. We've read and heard about AI a lot in the news lately. Can you kind of expand a little bit on how AI factors into what you all do at Swoop, and where you see this technology going in the future in healthcare marketing?
It's such a good question, because I think everyone probably has a different concept of what AI is. Similar to the omni-channel buzzword, it means something different to everyone. For us, AI is incredible at digesting and summarizing and crawling enormous data sets and finding patterns in those data sets. So an example of how we might use it, there's only so much you can glean from claims, medical claims, pharmacy claims. It's easy to pull out an ICD-10 code diagnosis or an NDC that's used. But if you think about trying to find a physician that has a patient before they're diagnosed is much more complicated if there's no ICD-10 code. So it's about looking for specific patterns in behavior, creating a query or code that really crawls and looks for certain hits, and then pulling that together and helping us to create audiences off of that query that we've developed. It's enormously helpful. It's incredibly powerful for finding patterns in the data, identifying patients who have yet to be diagnosed, identifying physicians who are likely to have a relapse refractory patient, et cetera, that can't be determined through a code set alone.
Right. Yeah, I've been amazed to hear the receptivity and the openness to using it on the healthcare provider side. There's a lot of wariness as well. But it's also interesting to hear how you all are thinking about it and approaching it and utilizing it on the other side of the HCP marketer relationship. So great stuff. Any final closing remarks you'd like to make?
It's this has been an incredible experience. I really appreciate everything you write about. I read, so I'm a big fan of what you do. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much, and likewise, love your comments that you make on LinkedIn. Big fan as well.
Appreciate it.
Well, this has been fascinating, Erin. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.